All right, welcome back to another edition of Scaling Secrets. I am your host, Alex Mahaz, and today we have the privilege of sitting down with the highly accomplished and esteemed Grant Tampus, the founder of Tampus Consulting Group. With over 25 years of experience in leadership, development, and consulting, Grant has become a true expert in the field. He has worked with countless leaders across various industries, helping them unlock their full potential and achieve remarkable success. Grant's extensive knowledge and practical strategies has not only transformed teams, but also improved company culture and morale. We are so thrilled to have him here today to share his insights and wisdom throughout his career and journey. Welcome to the show, Grant. How you doing?
Good, good. How you doing?
Good. I'm really excited to dive into your background and learn more about you. But first, you want to just kick us off with a little bit about you and kind of how you got to where you're at within your career.
Certainly. Well, I jumped around a little when I was young. I actually worked briefly in both the media and also as a school teacher, but eventually found my way into the field of psychology, and in particular, what's called organizational psychology. So, sort of the study of companies and leaders. And I've worked in that industry for several years, worked for a couple of big firms, have had my own firm for about the last 20 years. And we basically focus on teams and morale kinds of issues, leadership issues, and business strategy. And we have all kinds of different size companies, big ag, big pharma, small, not so much mom and pop, but maybe 50 to 100 employee companies, lots of startups, lots of companies trying to scale and running into some of those problems that you run into when you're trying to grow quickly, finding good leaders, retaining them, developing your people, et cetera. So we do a lot of work in agriculture, pharmaceutical, high tech, kind of across the board. It's been a great career. And then I guess one other thing, during this time, I've also been involved with two different ag tech startups and actually worked as a CEO and also a chairman of the board for those. So I have my own experience running a startup company as well.
Mhm.
So kind of a wide range of experiences.
Love it. I love it. And yeah, definitely starting any company, especially a startup, takes a lot of grit, a lot of moving parts, especially in the beginning. So, hats off to you. But I want
Especially
to
in Boise, Idaho, where there's no
oh,
in Silicon Valley, which is where I was actually raised. You know, raising a million or 5 million or $10 million is not that big a deal. In Boise, most of the investors want to give you $100,000, and so we raised $6 million off of about 100 and some investors. So we
wow.
did it the hard way
Yep.
for sure.
Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely. And that takes a lot of, determination and having the right people around you too. So,
for
um,
sure, for
awesome.
sure.
But yeah, obviously, your experience in leadership is truly impressive. So I'm really curious, can you give our audience, some key strategies or techniques that you found, Grant, over your years of, really just being effective and growing different leaders and helping them get to their full potential?
Sure. I actually wrote a book, so it's been a decade now since I did it, called Leadership Isn't Rocket Science. And the whole premise of that book was that most leaders, and for that matter, companies, make business way more complicated than it needs to be, with things like business jargon, overly complex strategies and goals. They basically have their employees confused.
Mm.
I mean, you ask, there's statistics that show that 2% of employees in corporate America know the mission statement of the organization that they work for. And a mission statement is the purpose of your organization. So essentially, 2% of employees out there even understand the purpose of the company that they're working for. So most of my training is around use plain language, speak in layman's terms to your employees and to your customers. Put away the MBA textbook business jargon. Really make things simple for your workforce. because often I find workforces are confused and frustrated and end up leaving because they don't know how their boss feels about them. They don't know what their company's trying to do. And if you can get them to buy into those things, then you actually have a chance. So I keep it simple, as the book title suggests.
Yeah, definitely. And you kind of mentioned some obstacles right there. And what are some common challenges, you've really come across throughout the years? And, how do you really help, some leaders overcome some of these challenges?
Well, I think the most important by far, and I write about it and talk about it all the time, is how do you retain, and then once you've or recruit, and then once you've gotten them, retain your key people. I mean, if I've seen anything over 25 years of doing this, whoever has the best team 90% of the time is going to win, right? People figure the operations out of different businesses. I have a Napa Auto Parts has been a long time client,
Mhm.
and I had a guy that owns 30 Napa Auto Parts store once say to me, and in his average store did $1 million in sales a year, and he says my store manager will determine whether I do 1.5 million or 500,000,
Wow.
just that position. So $1 million swing in $1 million store based solely on who your manager is.
Hmm.
So his whole business model is finding good managers and then just desperately trying to retain them. And so it's just, to me, most of business, assuming you've got some kind of a decent product or service, is finding exceptional people and then keeping them and developing them.
Hmm. And yeah, I definitely believe, having, kind of like that open door policy, especially as a manager, and allowing your team to, come to you for advice and share some concerns on what's on their mind, even if it's cross function and you're not working with that department every day. I think that's so important for internal growth, and ultimately going to help kind of your organization scale to where it needs to be. So
For
I love
sure.
it.
Yeah, for
Um,
sure.
in terms of, just like, I want to keep, going off of leadership style, because it's so important. It really kind of helps, your ultimate vision for any company really grow over time. What are, some like common, tips that you could give any type of leader, CEO, business founder, that, is really struggling to grow and scale and get some of their internal team on board with their mission?
Well, I think you have to do some reflecting, I think. I mean, people will get excited and get behind a leader that's listening to them, that is communicating a clear vision, that is complimenting them. I think if you're having trouble getting going, assuming once again you have some kind of a decent product or service, it's probably a leadership issue. And so I think what I don't see, and I especially see with companies, small companies trying to scale, is an unwillingness by the founder or the senior executives to look at themselves and really what are they doing well and doing poorly. And I've seen way more companies fail because of uh, candidly, usually very arrogant, narcissistic leadership that's unwilling to change than I have for any different factor related to a product or service. I mean, most growing companies fail because of the leadership teams. And
Hmm.
so I think the ability to look at yourself, take feedback from people, seek feedback from investors, from stakeholders, uh, but a lot of companies go under because, in particular, the founder, but also the senior executive, just don't do any self-reflection.
Yep. So important, and especially personally too, personally and professionally. But yeah, really reflecting and understanding, are you do you have the right systems in place, and are you, personally as a leader helping the people around you grow, and just really look in the mirror. I think that it's so important. I love how you touched on that. But I wanna transition a little bit to one of your books. I know you mentioned one of them, but one of your recent publications, "Diagnosing Your Team: A Practical Guide for Understanding and Transforming Teams." I love the title. So obviously, that's been generating a lot of buzz. And I started kind of looking into it. So I'm curious, what inspired you to write this book? And what are some practical solutions that you offer for, really recognizing and addressing performance issues within teams?
Well, what inspired me to write it is every day I see totally dysfunctional teams
Hmm.
with lots of smart people on them,
Yeah.
but for whatever reason, whether it's leadership or processes or personalities, they're not thriving. What research in my industry shows is that about 10% of teams are elite, about 60% underperform. The elite teams overperform, about 60% underperform, and the other 30 are sort of floating somewhere in the middle.
Hmm.
And so I wrote it because I see it constantly that teams just aren't effective, they're not efficient, and usually it can be traced to either leadership or communication. It's conflict that's going unresolved. And in particular, when I say communication, what I would call passive aggressive communication. So
Hmm.
instead of having direct, assertive discussions with one another about business challenges, their most common form of communication is, gossiping in the break room or sending nasty email messages or, stabbing the guy in the back. It's all of this indirect destructive communication going on. And what I have found over the years is that the most effective teams, the common denominator is when there are issues, they put them on the table and in a timely fashion, they resolve them.
Hmm.
It's not at all unusual in my job to find out about a conflict that has existed among team members for 5, 6, 7 years, and it's gone unresolved, and literally hundreds of hours of the team's time has gone into this, you know, uh, passive aggressive communication and disruptive behavior. So that's probably number one: effective communication.
Hmm. Yeah, and it's so important, especially when, you're trying to, really level up your teams and grow and get to the next level within your organization, no matter what industry you're in. So yeah,
Mm-hmm.
having that open door policy, being able to communicate crystal clear on what you're trying to get out of, within your teams and within your organization. So but definitely, I'm curious. Obviously, 25 plus years of experience. Founding, Thompson Consulting. That's such a great a lot of years of experience. So, but I'm curious. I'm sure there were some obstacles and roadblocks that you faced, throughout your journey. So I'm curious. What was that one obstacle that you faced? Maybe 5, 10, 15 years ago that really helped you get to where you're at today in 2024.
Well, I think the biggest obstacle was starting in this business, even though I've been at a couple of big consulting firms. It is brutal. I mean, you're in the early days, I was taking any consulting job for any amount of money anywhere in the United States. And I did, trainings in grocery warehouses and in garages for, mechanics and teamsters in a West Virginia coal mine, and you just did everything. And then you just keep grinding, and multiple times you think, well, I'm just not going to be able to pull this off. I'm not going to be, especially when you start having a family and kids.
Hmm.
And then one day the calls just start coming in to you. And so it'd be hard for me to maybe point at one thing. It was the early years of just probably grinding. And
Hmm.
I think a lot of business owners and people trying to scale their business, I get it. At some point, you want to just say no, no more. I got to go take a job, the steady job. And one day you just reach critical mass, and it all happens. It all starts to happen. And
Hmm.
I just think, perseverance and getting a good team. I have 4 employees that have been with me for 20 years or more, most of them. And so now my job's easy, right?
Hmm.
Because they're as talented or more talented than I am. So I think that's the other critical piece: is get good people, train them up, and then keep them.
Definitely. Yeah, that's just a test to your leadership style, having those employees that want to stick around, for the long run and understand, kind of the culture and where you have been trying to go for so many years. And I think that's so important as a leader and when you're really trying to get to the next level, you really can't do it alone. I mean, that solopreneur is, I don't really believe in that. I think you need to build teams and have a great structure around you
Mhm.
if you're really trying to scale and get to the next level within your industry. So I love that you're able to do that. Um, but in terms of just customer focus, like and some of the clients and industries and different sectors you work with, how do you assure that your consulting company stays customer focused? And what are some of those skills that you're putting in place or blueprints to remain client and customer focused the last few years?
Well, I mean, our own mission statement is customer service above all else.
Mhm.
And so when an employee joins me, there haven't been that many because they tend to stay. They've been with me forever. But when we add someone, I say more than anything else, I will forgive any mistake except being rude or disrespectful or mistreating a customer.
Mhm.
There's basically one thing that will get you fired by me in this job. Anything else I can pretty much forgive. And so you stress it when you interview people. You stress it every day. There are hundreds, thousands of consulting firms out there, and a lot of us are basically delivering similar content. And so it's going to come down to customer service, right? Who picks it, who calls back when the client calls, who goes a little bit further than the other ones, who's responsive, who's friendly. And so we just preach it constantly. And most of our customers we've had a decade or longer. We've had some for 20 some years in consulting, especially with big consulting firms. The vision that a lot of people have is you hire this consulting firm for this huge project. They come in, they tell you everything to do, they tell you who to get rid of. They're there for about 3 weeks, and then they send you a $500,000 invoice. And we take a very different, slow and steady, get to know you,
Mhm.
go through your struggles, and we take the complete different approach, less flash, more substance. And we have found, and this is very Idaho. I mean, I do business all over the West Coast, but we're based in Boise. It's hard to get a client in Idaho. If you get one, you'll never lose them if you take good care of them. And that's really true for this sort of mountain region in general.
Mhm.
And so we service the hell out of our customers basically. We talk about it every day. So
I love it. I love it. Kind of creating that, that family culture, building that relationship, was still, kind of balancing the professional side of things.
yeah.
It's so important. And, I think, I guess it depends on what region and what state you are because, different New York, maybe might not be as that same,
Yeah.
home feeling that you get, maybe, in the same Colorado or Idaho or wherever you're at. So, but I love that because I think it's so important, especially when you're working one on one with a client or a company, and they're going to invest a lot of money into you and your brand. So it's so important to have that
I mean, from
relationship.
a scaling standpoint, which I know is sort of your focus, our theory is if every year if we keep every client and
Hmm.
we add three or four more good ones, we're going to have 20, 30, 40% every year. Now that might not be as sexy as a high tech company, growing by 300%, but in the consulting world, you make a very nice living, and your employees are happy, and we're growing, and so that's it's a very simple business model. Don't lose anybody, and add 3 to 5 good customers every year, and it's proven to be a really good model for us.
Hmm. Definitely. And just have that metric in place and being able to measure it is so important. So,
Mhm.
um, I want to change gears a little bit into, organizational psychology, that obviously you've had a background in that. And I'm really
Mhm.
curious, Grant, like how have you approached, understanding the dynamics within an organization and really identifying areas for improvement?
Well, it's interesting. We have a lot of blue collar clients, grocery stores, ag companies, et cetera. The last thing I do before I go in is let them know that I have a doctorate in organizational psychology. They'd think I
Yep.
was some kind of a witch doctor, right? If
Yep.
I did that. So,
Mhm.
that might come later. But the first thing we do is we just talk to them like, normal people, and try to get to know them at their level and where they're coming from. Having said that, everything is psychology, right? It's rewards and punishment and positive reinforcement and personalities. And we might not be calling it psychology, but in many ways we're doing what a psychologist would do. We're trying to get people to communicate better, almost like, in fact, I use in my training a lot of husband wife examples or family examples. What you're trying to do in the workplace in many ways is what you're trying to do in a high functional family or on a high functional sports team.
Mhm.
It's good communication, it's good clear leadership, it's giving clear goals. And in many ways, good leaders have some of the same fundamentals as good parents: structure, clear directions. So it's there's a lot of psychology in the workplace. You just have to frame it in a way that is non-threatening, to the people that are going to consume
Mhm.
your input.
Yep, exactly. The last thing you want to do is, push somebody away because you're throwing all these big words and,
Exactly.
that micromanaging is coming into play and you want to kind of take it steady. And I think that's so important. So, um, but I have one more question and then I want to save a little bit of time for some rapid fire questions and then leave you any final remarks. So, my last question is, what advice, Grant, would you give to aspiring leaders, inspiring CEOs, founders of companies that might be, early in their career and they're really looking to make a significant impact within their organization as they're growing?
Yeah, I think be open to feedback. Don't no, don't even not even just be open. Seek it. Ask people how you're doing. Ask, because people. My experience has been people will give it to you, but you
Mhm.
usually have to ask for it to get it, unless you have some kind of a formal program where you're given feedback on 360 assessments or something like that. So that would be one. One would be find a mentor or mentors, more than one. Look around the company and say, God, I really like the way he or she is running that department, and go ask them to be your mentor and have lunch with them once a quarter. I mean, I have spent my whole career borrowing from people that I was impressed by, whether that's a leader that I worked for or a presenter that I thought was especially dynamic. There's nothing wrong with incorporating a little bit of this and a little bit of that into your own core style.
Mhm.
So, yeah, I mean, read, ask lots of questions. That is the time, and seek feedback. And then when you seek it, be open to it. Don't be defensive about it. I guess those would probably be the big ones.
Yeah, I love that. Be open to feedback, be open to constructive criticism, especially from somebody who's kind of, ahead of you, a couple years ahead.
Yep.
Always be, that personal development is so big, especially whether you're a founder, CEO, or, you're just starting out of college, having that continuous growth mindset is so important, whether that's reading audiobooks, taking courses, whatever that is. So that's going to really kind of help you grow over time. Um, but I want to go into some rapid fire questions
Sure.
here. So that first one I have is, what do you feel are the key attributes of a successful entrepreneur?
Well, I think they're being relentless is probably one. Being uh, Not letting no bother you, just focused, would be another one. Many of them are very dynamic. Not all of them, but many of them are. But I just think it's perseverance, it's courage. I have just enormous respect for entrepreneurs
Mhm.
because there's just nothing like it. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
you get 100 no's for every yes, and you just have to keep grinding. And you've got to have self-confidence, faith, courage. I could go on and on, but I have tremendous success for them.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Not being able to fail, and you might not succeed right away, and kind of seeing the big mountains, seeing out in the
Yep.
distance. So I love it. What's something people think is important in business, but doesn't matter that much?
Oh my gosh, something important in business that doesn't matter that much. Well, I think initially, this may sound crazy, I think initially that can be money. I mean, ultimately, of course it matters.
Hmm.
But if you're too focused on just the dollars right off the bat and you're, for instance, pushing too hard to close instead of listening to your customers, I think it can be a mistake. And I think you might get that first close or that second close. You'll never get any repeat business. So I think, of course, don't get me wrong here. Ultimately, you have to see return on investment and you have to hit your financial goals. But I think it doesn't have to happen in the first business meeting. You form a relationship, get to know them, so that it can be a longer and a more fruitful relationship.
100%. And people can, they could smell it off of you, if you're but money hungry and you're just looking for a quick dollar. I feel like today, especially in the digital tech world, like you could just,
Yeah.
really tell right away somebody's attention. So it's just like your point earlier, it's so good to build that relationship and be sincere and authentic. Um, Last question. What are the top three tips about leadership, development, morale, building teams, company culture, that you want our audience and your audience to walk away with today?
Well, I number one, and this is going to sound like a broken record, find good people, develop them, and then keep them. And your life as a business person is exponentially easier and more successful. So that'd be number one.
Mhm.
Um, Praise your people, make sure they feel appreciated. I am so far from a perfect boss. I'm disorganized. I've got all kinds of issues, but I think my employees forgive me those issues because I appreciate them and I tell them a lot. And then I think number three would be good, clear communication using plain language. For executives, don't confuse don't use your fancy business school jargon. You're not impressing your employees; they're laughing at you,
Mhm.
frankly. So I don't care how smart you are; you can be very smart and still use plain language, right?
Yep.
So clear communication, clear goals, clear mission. Those would
Mhm.
probably be my big three.
Definitely. I love it. Yeah. The more clear you are, especially with your point, especially if you're trying to close a big deal, the better. And you don't need that Yale or Harvard type of vocabulary for most industries nowadays, especially with just automation and AI and how everything is just so technical, just be very crystal clear with how you're trying to communicate. So
Yeah.
I love it. But one last question, what are your future goals with, Thompson Consulting Group, and where are you really looking to go within let's say next 2 years?
Well, we want to keep growing our, 20-30% a year. I've given all my employees profit sharing, so they're all in now. We had a good year, and so we want to have even better year. So I want to keep growing my business. I've got two books I'm working on, so that's a big project. And I just enjoying my team and my customers. It's a great job. I feel blessed to have it, and so keep doing what we're doing, and because I really enjoy it, and I've got a great group.
Mhm. Awesome. I love it. I love it. And where can people find you, Grant?
ThompsonConsulting.com. ThompsonConsulting.com is
Gotcha.
so it's pretty easy to find us. Yeah, so look
Awesome.
us up on
And
the website.
perfect. And we'll put your two books, in the chat here. I want everybody to get a chance to get them. Are they
Thank
available
you.
on audio as well?
At the moment, they're not, but we're working on that.
Okay,
Um,
perfect.
but you can get them off our website or you can get them on Amazon.
Awesome. Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate it, Grant. It was really great to hear your story, and your journey, and I'm really excited to kind of see your growth within your company the next year or so. And it was an honor to have you.
Yeah, thank you, Alex. I really
Yeah.
appreciate it.
Yeah, definitely.
All
Well,
right.
thank you guys for tuning in to another episode of Scaling Secrets. Until next time, take care.